Hi, this is Lazarus Cover YouTube, and my name is Chuck, and I'm going to. This isn't any particular series I'm doing. This is sort of a personal story journey, just sort of just like a testimony thing, a little bit. But I wanted to do this because currently, right now, well, let me tell you a story. I'll tell you the story, and you'll understand why. The title of it is Spring Barrel. When I was a pastor's kid, as long as I remember, my dad got out of. I was born in 1946, right after the war. I'm a baby boomer, early baby boomer, and my dad got out of the service, and he got married, and the strange thing was, I think in the early part he went to Ohio, and he was trained as an accountant, so he got a job as an accountant. And but he went to church. Everybody went to church back then. And he felt the call to go into the ministry. So he ended up going into the ministry, and he trained at Union Theological Seminary. Which is a very liberal seminary, very, very liberal in those days even. And I remember I was young. I was very young in Ohio, but I was older. And we lived in a big building in New York City, and then we moved to a parsonage in Ozone Park in New York, and right outside the Aqueduct racetrack. And I can remember the racetrack loudspeakers during the services and stuff like that. But he went into the Methodist Church, and the Methodist Church, if you don't know, they basically, the bishop tells you where to go. And in the early days, they told my dad to go to Pulteney, Vermont, so we went to Pulteney, Vermont. And then after that, we went to Windsor, Vermont. So we were there, we had four years or something like that, 4 years. Then Windsor was 2.5 years, and Manchester was 5 years, and Rye, New Hampshire was 5 years. And so in 4 or 5 towns, I moved all the time. We moved all the time. And in Manchester, we lived in 2 places. And I think what that result was is I didn't feel like I had a place. I was never in a school that long. I never made never have been able to make fast friends very well. And we just moved a lot. I was in Akron, Ohio when a baby. I was in New York City for a while. I have memories of that. I have memories of Ozone Park. I have more memories of Pulteney, Vermont, and Rye, New Hampshire, Manchester, New Hampshire. All these places. And then I went away to school in Indiana, and after Indiana was Vietnam, and I went into the Navy for 6 years. So if you sort of look at that, I was never any place very long. But my mom inherited a little bit of money when we were in Manchester, and we'd been tent camping previously, made big long trips, big long camping trips, and my folks were tired of that, and they wanted a place to stay. And we were in Manchester, and my mom had inherited a little money, and we took a trip up into northern New Hampshire. In Manchester, it was 3 or 4 hours up there, and my mom wanted a place where the church folks couldn't find us, because she wasn't into entertaining, so she wanted to be away from the church folks, and this place was away from the church folks. It's 2.5. It's maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours north of the White Mountains. So it was a ways. It was 4.5 hours, 3.5, 4.5 hours from Manchester, when they moved down to Massachusetts, it's a good solid 5.5, 6 hour trip. But they moved up. We camped. And we found a place. They asked around, and talked to the locals, and the locals turned us on to a guy who was well known up there, a guide who'd been a guide up there. And in those days, the place was wild. The road was bumpy, one paved road. It was bumpy, it was wild, it was beautiful, and my mom fell absolutely head over heels in love with it. It was rough, it was wild, it was beautiful, and and she was a crazy woman. She was driven. She loved going out on little adventures, and we'd go on little adventures every place. And we were turned on to this guy who was a guide, and it turns out he had a piece of property up there. And we ended up, I went with my dad. I remember going with my dad and this older guy. He was old, tough old guy, and he took us a tour through this property that he had. It was his, and he grew up on this property. He'd been up there. He fished on this property. It was pasture when he was a kid, and now there were huge trees there, huge woods there, and everything like that, and beautiful lake shore frontage and stuff like that. And he was looking. He had some conditions, but he was looking to sell it, and but he was willing to sell it for a very reasonable price if he liked the family, and he ended up selling it at a reasonably good price to my family, and we got this raw piece of property. There was nothing there. There was no roads. There was nothing there. And they bought it so we'd inevitably stay there, but there was nothing there to stay. So the adventure was settling it so that we could stay there, and that adventure was the sort of the fabric and story of my family's life. It became the escape from life. It was, and I remember the seaplanes landed in the lake. It was beautiful. It was absolutely raw and beautiful and rough. And the adventure of the place was, we were doing stuff we'd never done before. We were working in the woods. We were cutting trees. We were like the frontiersmen building stuff. It was an adventure. And the funny thing is, to bring recovery into you, if you're new in recovery, you need to understand that new recovery is an adventure. When I got sober, it was an amazing adventure. It was brand new every place. Every place was brand new. I was doing things I'd never done before. And up north was like that. It was brand new for our family. It became the sort of hearth of our family. We moved, we bought it in Manchester, and we moved to Rye, and then they moved to Massachusetts, and I, went to college, and I came back, and I went in the Navy and everything like that. But, things changed, but up north didn't change. It was just the place we went. And my mom loved it. She just had, it became, when they retired, they were up there 3.5, 4 months. It became everything to her. I mean, it was more than it should have been, but it was extremely emotionally important to everybody in the family. And my brother had to spend more time there. I came in at 14, and I went away to college time I was away, so I didn't spend as much time there as my brother did. He was 6 years younger. But the place was, I guess what I'm trying to say, it was a massive adventure. They cut all the trees down. It was terrible. We used to burn burn the slash, and it was we'd go up there and we'd work for days and days, and we'd have very simple life. It was just we'd work during the day, and we'd take a lunch break, and we'd read at night and read the things, and then we'd sit by the fire and talk. It was marvelous. It was absolutely marvelous. And it became the sort of the subject of the family. Everything about it was the subject of the family. It was the lore of the family. If you're in recovery, you're in for an adventure. Don't run away from the adventure. Don't run away from it. Because I visit, I just came back from visiting a friend that I got sober with. We were young. He was early 20s. I was 28 when I got sober. I'm 73 now. And he's in his 60s. And you know what we do? We tell the stories about the adventure when we first got sober. It's up north, the family lore, the foundation of the family lore was telling the lore of the family. When you get in recovery, and you stay sober and straight and clean, there'll be people that'll gather around you, and you'll tell the lore of getting sober and clean. You'll tell the stories of getting sober and clean. You'll tell the adventures. You'll tell the mishaps. You'll tell them the romantic disasters and the remote and the trials and tribulations. You'll tell the stories of the people that you fell in love with and the people that it was an adventure. You'll tell the stories of it's like a soap opera, or it's like a great emotional canvas of painting. All the different people, all the different things. My kids want me to write a book about all that stuff. They want me to tell the stories, and that's, for you in recovery, your period of getting sober and clean. The early years are your soap opera, your thing, because you're gonna tell stories. You probably now sit around and tell stories. Certain people who got sober and are doing well, and other people who are silly, and other people who are dying. Because there's always dying in this business. That's the recovery business is a dying business. We stayed sober and clean, but there were people, and we talk about it, the people that didn't make it, the people that were told don't pick up a drink, and they did. For addicts and everybody else, it's like, the cousin, the somebody, the so-and-so, the friend, the whatever. You've been in rehab, you've been this and that together, and you've had fun together, and you struggled together, and you laughed and cried together, and maybe you relapsed together. But that's the adventure. That is the adventure of the thing. And it's your possession. If you stay sober, you stay clean and stuff, you get a gift. You get a gift of being sober, clean, and having a story to tell. A good story. I mean, it's got its tragedy. Maybe you relapse and stuff, and you can tell that story. But you learn things. That's what I want you to get an idea of in Spring Barrel, is that recovery is like that piece of property in my family. It's poignant, it's difficult, it's tough, but it marks your life. Your early years of sobriety, if you're a relapse over and over again, you never gain this. You just have you have to go through the pain and the work and stuff of staying sober. Find good people to get sober with. People who are trying, people who are staying sober. Find good sponsors who've been sober a long time and can get you along the way. And if you do that, even through the pain, you will have a great story to tell. Your life will be, like I said in the previous video, your life will be blessed because you worked through a lot of stuff. Well, let me get back to Spring Barrel. You're in recovery and you're on an adventure. We were on an adventure, and one of the key points I want to make about this is the fact that it's not a perfect adventure. No adventure's perfect. We say, I want to be in recovery and I want to do it perfectly. You're not going to do it perfectly. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to chase the woman that's ridiculous. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to be horrible. Should you do it? No. Will you do it? Probably. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to mark your life. But that's just the way the adventure is. Spring Barrel, the story of Spring Barrel is we got the property and there was a spring on it. And it wasn't developed, and the guy that sold us to it said, this is, the spring comes with it. It was on another piece of land, but the spring came with the property. We have the rights, to this day we have the rights to that spring. 40, 50 years ago we have the rights. It's on another people's property and they are beholden to protect the spring. They can't, when they built a place near the lake, they had to do special work to ensure that that spring stayed viable. So they had to put in the pipes to bring the spring water over to our property. And we, in the early days, we wanted to, build and ensure that spring was good. And people we bought it from said, you need to do some work here to frame it and cover it and stuff like that. So we didn't ask them what they thought. We didn't ask for help. We just figured it out ourselves. And what we figured out was the spring barrel. And there'll be a picture of it. We still have that barrel. It stays on a property through all my folks' life, and after they passed away, it stayed by the lake. It's 30 feet from where it was supposed to be. It's big, heavy, thing. You'll see it. I don't really have size, but it's a big. It's like a, heavy rock ceramic pipe. And we worked it out ourselves. We did a lot of the stuff ourselves, and it was a big plan. We were going to buy this thing, and we were going to dig a hole, and we were going to put it by the spring, and it was going to fill. It was going to fill with water, and everything was going to be good. But the problem with it is we didn't ask anybody for advice. We just did it. And I can remember being in Manchester in the garage with my dad, and we were drilling holes into it, and we were doing. And if you look at the pictures, you can see the holes. You can see where we drilled the holes in this pipe. We had a plan. Did we ask anybody about that plan? No, but we had a plan. And that was sort of the way we did it early on. It's part of the family lore. That's what we did. We set about it, and that was the adventure. We were going to make this place our own and do stuff. And we didn't ask for help a lot. We didn't ask we were flatlanders, and we didn't ask anybody local to give us advice. We just went and barged ahead. And the spring barrel, the pipe was one of the extraordinary examples. It didn't work. It could never work. It would never work. And the funny thing is, for one reason or another, we keep that barrel around right in front. It's part, I love that barrel because it's part of the family lore of the place. It's not complimentary, but it's the family lore of the place. It's right now we're wondering whether to keep the place or sell it, and it's just emotionally, what am I going to do? Pack that up and take it home and put it in my backyard? I might rent a truck and figure out how to get it into the truck and take it home, because emotionally it's that precious to me. And it's a representative of making a mistake. In your recovery, as you grow up and you stay sober a long time and you get together with friends and stuff like that, you'll probably keep mementos of the good stuff, but you'll keep mementos of the bad stuff, the foolish, silly things, the things that you didn't do right, the foolish things. And my story is a lot like that. I look back on things and God, I made so many stupid mistakes. I didn't drink, I didn't use, and I made stupid mistakes. And the effect of those are, they're still there. The monuments of those are still there. The spring barrel is still sitting by the lake. If you're sober a long time, you might have 2 or 3 marriages behind you. They're your spring barrels. They are the markers of your foolishness. And it's not a bad thing in the sense of like, damn, I was sober and I was stupid. Sobriety or recovery doesn't bring wisdom. You gotta ask people for help. Chances are, if you'd ask around, somebody would tell you that it's not going to work. It was that way with the spring barrel. If you ask around, we asked around after we did it, and they said, no, that's not going to work. It's really simple. You dig out the thing. There's rock there. You dig out the thing. You put a pipe in there that's got holes drilled in it, and you just lay it in the water, and the water will seep into the pipe, and then gravity will take it out. And then you just seal that up and cover it up. And that'll be the best way to do it. And lo and behold, we did it and it worked. We got water. You have to boil the water and stuff like that, but we had water. And if we'd gone and asked, we would have saved ourselves a whole bunch of trouble. But that was just a symptom, an example of an overlying problem. We did the same thing every place. In the early days, we didn't ask anybody. So we learned later about the spring barrel, and it's still sitting there. But we learned. But we didn't learn completely. And in the early days, we had a plan for everything. When you get sober at the beginning, you get clean at the beginning, you got a plan for your life. My thing is, don't jump right away. Get sober, get straight. Find some people that have been sober a while. Get used to asking for advice. Get used for asking for advice. We didn't ask for advice for any of this stuff, and we had a plan. We were going to do the spring in one day. We spent a day and got no place. Then we asked for help. We were going to do a road in one day. It was a spring on one day, the road on one day, and we were going to build a tent platform on the third day. It was a little bit like the creation story, it was like, we were going to rise the camp out of the ashes in 3 days, because we didn't have much time, because my dad's vacation wasn't that long. Back then, we might have 3 weeks, and we wanted to camp and stuff like that. So we were going to we were going to camp up at another place, and we were going to build that camp and then move down and be settled in there, and not have to pay for the campground, the campsite. Didn't work out. We were in that campsite the whole time. But we, as a family, got humbled. We came up with another plan. And we talked to people, and they suggested things. And we finally did what they suggested. My folks didn't want to do it because it cost money, and they didn't have a lot. But, that's what we did. We did what they suggested, and it's, the funny thing is, we did what the spring barrel represents. It represents us being foolish and not asking. It's also a family monument to the family thing, which is very precious. The thought of selling it breaks my heart, but I think we might have to. But it's amazing, that thing. You're going to have an amazingly wonderful story of getting sober and getting clean if you just hang in there. Now you have, to a certain extent, the ability to choose the story that's going to come from that. You can have a story of ups and downs, but sober. I'm sober 44 years. Ups and downs, mistakes, stuff. But through some sort of grace God gave me, I didn't use, I didn't drink, and I have a story to tell. What worked, what didn't. But I have my spring barrels laying around, and they're precious to me. You know, they're in time they become a joyful conversation with people that you know, my friend Tom up in Vermont. You know, once a year I go up and see him, and we laugh and we tell stories. You know, we even tell stories about the people that didn't make it, which is not sad. It's just reinforced. You know, we had a friend who I got sober with, you know, and he had trouble relapsing and stuff like that. He was just, you know, he had issues, you know, and it turns out he had a dual diagnosis. He had psychiatric plus alcoholism and stuff like that. And he just couldn't get sober because nobody had dealt with the underlying issues. And I can remember we went through a lot of stuff with Yule. And the funny thing is, maybe what I'll do is I'll take a picture, because he was crazy. He was a painter. My friend Tom's a painter, and he was crazy. But he eventually they got some medicine into him. It stabilized him enough. He married a lady who was a priest in one of the churches, you know, a high church, Episcopal church, I think. And he moved with her, and she had a parish, and he lived in the parish, and relatively functional. She had a job, and he was relatively functional. And what he did was he painted all the time. And he painted and painted and painted and painted and painted and painted. He was an artist. He painted. All modern part don't have modern eye. Don't have, you know. It's like, okay, whatever. But Tom says it's really good stuff. And he painted and painted and painted, and he got sober. He got clean. You know, still crazy, but he had on medication and stuff like that. And he had a wonderful story. You know, and then he got his meds crossed up one summer, got into the heat, and ended up in heat stroke and died. It's sad. He was probably, you know, he's probably in his 50s or 60s when that happened. 50s when that happened. He was younger than me by a little bit. So it was probably in his 50s. They were camping. It was 90 degrees. He crossed his meds up. You know, he ended up laying down in a tent, which was 115 degrees, and he went unconscious and he ended up dying. And but he has a story, you know, and he had a mountain of art. And Tom went, and she had to retire and leave, and all this art was there. And he took trucks down there, and he got all this art, you know, all this modern art that he painted. And Tom did truckloads of that stuff. And it's, in a strange sort of way, it's a beautiful, tragic, beautiful story. You know, he got sober, he got clean, he got functional within his limits, and he created art that fulfilled him. And that art is around. You know, Tom gave me one, and I hung it up in a house. I'll take a picture of it and put it. I'll show it in this video. You know, it's modern art. It's like whatever, but it represents a life. It represents the amazing, wonderful, multi-dimensional story. You know, and you know the spring barrel represents a multi-dimensional, deep emotional story for me, for up north and up in the camp. You know, and your recovery is a multi-dimensional story. You know, the good, the bad, the ugly, the success, the failures, the relationships with kids you've had, relationship with exes you've had, relationships with all that stuff, the friends that are gone, the friends that are alive, the friends of this, you know, the history. It's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful, beautiful, poignant, heartbreaking, heartwarming story. And I think that's what I want to think about the spring barrel. It's a wonderful story. You know, it's silly, it's embarrassing, it's, you know, what else are our stories? Silly, embarrassing, wonderful, you know, and if we don't drink, we don't use, we get better. We have a story, a beautiful, wonderful story. it's going to be amazing for everybody to see. And if you're getting sober, realize that you're putting the brush on the paper of your story. This is an eternal story. You know, this is something that the best writer and the best painter would love to tell about it, because it is a beautiful, amazing thing of danger and redemption and all those marvelous things. And you getting sober is the beginning of an adventure. Is it going to be pretty? No. It's going to be a spring barrel. It's going to be embarrassing. It's going to be stupid sometimes. But when you get older, and if you stayed sober and you stayed clean, you know, you're going to have a strange affinity for that spring barrel. You're going to be emotionally tied to it, because it's your family, it's your connections, it's a whole bunch of things. It's silly, it's ridiculous, it's everything. But the strange thing is, it's wicked important too. To me, that spring barrel is wicked important to me. And I don't know what to do about that spring barrel. I don't know what to do about that place. You know, it's a heartbreaking thing for me. It's my family. It's the heart of my family. And I've got to deal with that. But you have those things too. You have those spring barrels. You have those things that, when you get sober a long time, are going to be poignant and amazing and beautiful and heartbreaking all at the same time. And you got to understand something. Life is poignant. Life is heartbreaking. Life is wonderful. Life is marvelous. Life is great. Life is terrible. Life is heartbreaking. Life is exhilarating. Life is eternal in Jesus. And you have to decide. Don't drink. Go to a meeting. Ask for help. And in life, don't make decisions completely on yourself, but ask. Like the spring barrel, ask if the thing you're doing makes sense. It helps you make better sense. Proverbs talks about that. You know, wisdom is in the hands of many advisors. So, this is the spring barrel. I didn't know what I was going to talk about when I started, but I want you to value your recovery. The beautiful, amazing painting of redemption and glory and poignancy and silliness and stupidity and everything it is. If you look at it, any of our stories is a marvelous, wonderful, beautiful, three-dimensional circus of everything.